everybody. Thank you. So, did you? No, I know I'm not supposed to call this out, okay? But Phil was just being the master staller because my slides got messed up. And can we just give it up for Phil and his abilities as a host, man? My goodness. How many of you guys are fired up about the JAMstack? Woo! Come on. No, oh, that was weak. Did anybody get a JAMstack tattoo yet? Nobody? Nobody? Yeah, we didn't. Come on. Okay, a henna? No? All right, my name's Sean Urquhart. Like Phil said, I work for Netlify. I work on the open source Netlify CMS project. That is like the sun. Oh my God. I'm gonna stand over here for a minute. I work on the open source Netlify CMS project. My last name is difficult to spell and pronounce, so naturally I used it to represent myself across the entire internet to ensure no one ever finds me. But if you do, that's me on Twitter, GitHub, everywhere. I live in the great state of North Carolina, right on the coast, which means we have both bears and sharks. I've yet to see a bear riding a shark, although local wildlife experts say it's only a matter of time. I've also lived in Connecticut, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I have a lovely wife and 4 beautiful children. Nobody said aw? Come on, guys. Okay, we're going to say aw on 3. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Aw. There we go. That was better. We're going to talk about Git-based content management. And Git-based content management is not a new idea, but it is very much enabled as a viable approach to content management by the JAMstack. I hope you all enjoyed Mandy's talk because it was very beautiful, and mine, if you've noticed, is not. I am not a designer, but here's the thing. I've been listening to Chris Coyier. How many of you guys heard Chris Coyer's awesome talk yesterday? Right? Yeah, about the new powers of the front-end developer on the JAMstack and how we're empowered to do things without needing to go and get a back-end developer. We can write serverless functions and all these cool things, and you're empowered, and that's good. And I'm not a designer, but I wanted to empower myself and do this really well. And so I went about searching for resources that would help me empower myself, and I found this fantastic design resource. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's called Stock Photography, and it's these photographers that are at the top of their game, and they capture these moments of human emotion. They're so raw and just real, you know. And they really, it's moving. And I said, yes, I want this, and I'm going to use this to drive home points in my presentation. And I mean, some of them are free, and those are the best ones usually somehow. So that said, here we go. We're going to talk about bridges. So here's a local famous bridge. I don't know if anyone recognizes it. Golden Gate Bridge, world famous, built in the 1930s, feat of modern engineering. And, you know, I wanted to know why it was so famous. It's a little too famous. Looked into it. Turns out, okay, the reason the Golden Gate Bridge is so famous is that it is really long due to the longness of the length. It's longer than this. It's this smaller to fit on the screen for the picture, but the actual bridge is actually really long. It's, you know. So, you know, I went to see this thing. I wanted to find out what the big deal was, what's all the fuss about. I wasn't that impressed. I mean, it was, you know, it's big, and cars can go across it. It's a very pleasant hue of red or orange or something. But here's the thing. When they were planning this out, okay, and they were trying to get people from this side to that side, and, you know, the obvious solution is to build a big bridge and do all that, but did anyone take a step back, right, and think more creatively, you know? How else could we do this? How about, for example, getting rid of the water, right? You get rid of right? You get rid of the water, then you don't need to bridge this whole big gap because then you can just, you can just push it together, right? And then you just build this tiny bridge. And look at, I mean, that's way easier. It's simpler, it's shorter, probably cheaper. So, I mean, that's the way to go right there. But, you know, I wasn't there, no one asked me. So a CMS is a bridge. And on the JAMstack, CMSs are bridging a smaller gap. And that's really, really relevant for us. So I asked Siri to help me out. Siri is my fountain of wisdom whenever I need information, relationship advice, those kinds of things. I go straight to Siri every time. Said, hey Siri, define content management system. And she said, a system that manages content. And I said, that's best ever, Siri. Thank you. You never disappoint. But that's actually a really good answer, because the term CMS, content management system, is such a broad term, and there are so many things that content management systems do. The chances are, if I'm speaking with you about content management or a content management system, you might be thinking of something totally different than what I'm thinking of in that moment. And so if we're going to look at the changing landscape that the JAMstack is bringing, how that impacts content management solutions, we need to define the terms. So what is a CMS? So let's go broad strokes here, right? These are things that are generally true about most CMSs across stacks, or that might be true. And first of all, we have an editor interface, right? You're going to have some kind of way where, oh, the guy's taking my picture. I'm going to do one of these. Can I do this? Can I? Boom. Awesome. Awesome. So editor interface, you're going to have some way where people are going to be able to make changes to the website. That interface can look a lot of different ways. We saw Scott from Forestry demo Tina CMS yesterday. I don't know if you guys saw that. That's incredible. And there's so many different ways that interface can look. And then we have some sort of persistence layer. Generally, it's a database, but some sort of persistence layer where you're going to store input. You have long-lived state, and so that content editing is being stored. You have some CMSs are handling view generation. So they're actually taking your templates, your source, your assets, putting that all together with the content and creating something that a browser can actually process. And some CMSs are even going to serve the site and be the origin server that user requests are responded to. And so, this is just a few of them. These are just the biggies. I mean, we put so much on our poor, beleaguered content management systems. I mean, content management systems sometimes have to do search, e-commerce, caching, role-based access, RSS feeds, small business tax preparation, delicious fruit smoothies, some of them, and my personal favorite being There For You, the emotionally present content management system, is a big hit. We're just going to focus on these big ones here. So I decided to really kind of press into this, my newfound calling to be an empowered designer. Okay, for the visual thinkers and listeners, I did some drawing here, some very high quality drawing. So here's our gap, okay, that we're gonna be bridging with the CMS. We have some water down beneath, or blue spikes, if you're into blue spikes. It's your call, I'm not gonna tell you how to think. And then we have our front-end developer, and he's been tasked with rolling out a content-managed app or site to thousands and thousands of users who are eagerly awaiting. And he is visibly concerned because of the distance of this gap that he has to bridge. Also sharks and bears. And so traditionally, you're looking at a content management solution that's going to be, a monolith is going to, what? Okay, I don't know who did that. I'm going to get rid of, Phil, were you messing with my slides again? Always the jokester. Okay, so we're done with the sharks and bears. So we have this gap, and we have editing, storing, rendering, serving, these high-level bits that that a lot of content management systems are going to cover for you. A monolith, so WordPress, Drupal, the traditional content management solution, is going to do every one of these things all in one box. And so that efficiently bridges the gap. You go from nothing to live site with just this one package. Now, we are here at JAMstack Conf. I trust everyone understands why we believe this is not the future after all the talks we've already heard about the performance and security and developer experience benefits of the JAMstack. And so this is not the way that we want to go, but this is the way that we've been doing it. And so your stack looks something like this. It's a monolith. You have a CMS that literally contains your site. Right? You have an editing UI, you have source, your content, the server itself, it's all in that black box. And your user is just interacting directly with that. And there's a cache CDN in the middle, maybe, who knows. And so how is this landscape changing? If the CMS is bridging a smaller gap, how does that look? So first of all, you no longer need a server because you're going to have CI/CD that's going to be taking care of taking your assets and putting them out to the edge. So your content management system doesn't need to worry about that part of the gap. You don't need to generate views anymore. You have a static site generator that's going to take those templates and take your content, put all that together and bundle it. And so what we have left here is the headless CMS model that we generally know and love, right? We have an editor interface, we have a database probably somewhere, and so if we look at how that changes our gap, now we have considerably less gap that we have to try to fill in with this CMS. All we have to think about now is getting an editor UI in place and storing the content somewhere. Okay, this is the changing landscape of the JAMstack, and so our front-end developer is now cracking to go, as Phil would say. He's feeling empowered. And so your stack now looks like this. You have the CMS that has a shrinking footprint. It's now only concerned with the editor UI and the content, and now Git is handling your source, and Git contains your static site generator. So now you have this kind of infrastructure as code thing going on, which is awesome. And now you have all that JAMstack goodness where by API calls, your CI/CD platform is pulling down your content. At build time, it's pulling down your source. It's spitting out these static assets straight to the edge. And then your user is just dealing with your CDN, right? Performant, safe. And then you have this leg here where if someone's editing content, then they can hit the UI direct to edit that. So that's generally headless. Where does Git-based content management come in? Git-based content management is taking this a step further and looking at that persistence layer. And so the persistence layer is traditionally a database, and Git-based content management says, well, we already have a good persistence layer that we could use, and that's Git itself. And so if we use Git, we don't have to have a separate, and this is especially important for anyone that's running their own database in a server, in a droplet somewhere. If you can get rid of that and use Git, that's pretty fantastic. And so now our gap is that much shorter, and our front-end developer is ready to take over the world. All you have to worry about is that editing portion at this point. So that's kind of the value proposition of Git-based content management as a category. And so if we look at that here, look at what happens to the footprint of your content management solution. We go from having a box of everything to having that shrunken footprint where we're on the JAMstack and we're getting all those benefits. And then we kind of take it to the max here. And we have this kind of minimum viable approach where we just have an editing UI for your content management system. And everything else is just kind of there, and it's not being controlled by the content management system anymore. And of course, you still have that whole JAMstack flow, and now the user is dealing directly with the CDN. This also means that now your UI that is your content management system is actually being bundled and pushed to the edge, and your content management system itself in its entirety is on the CDN, which is bananas. So really, really, really interesting stuff here. And of course, now our very empowered front-end developer is ready to go take on the world. We salute you, front-end developer. So let's look at the characteristics of the new gap, okay? So by the new gap, we mean this little guy over here. And what we're looking at is a couple of things that come with this new changing landscape. Now that we have the CI/CD doing the serving, the static site generator handling rendering, and you have Git in place, and you have this tiny little gap, now we have to look at the other players that we're working with for our content management solution. And so the first thing to consider is that SSG is the new CMS. Now, this could be a whole talk unto itself. And the first thing I'll say is that I have CMS in quotes because that statement is false, obviously. A static site generator is not a CMS. But if you consider, if you're speaking with someone or if you are someone who works on a monolithic CMS, if you say that you're a WordPress developer, right? And so you've spent years working on WordPress sites, you developed them, and if we could get a pie chart of the way that time was spent working as a WordPress developer, right? We look at these kind of core things that a monolithic CMS does. You probably didn't spend most of that time dealing with the server part of WordPress directly, more than likely. More than likely, you didn't have to do that much with that on a regular basis. And you probably didn't have to do too much directly tinkering with the database. And so that leaves the editor interface and the view generator. The editor interface, you're going to spend some time on. You have advanced custom fields and kind of setting things up. But even still, it's still going to be a smaller part of the pie. The vast majority of the time that you're going to spend as a developer working with a monolithic CMS is going to be with this view generator. And that's where you're creating the templates. You're creating really the site itself by the rules set by the content management system. And so a lot of the value that you're bringing when you say I'm a WordPress developer comes in knowing how WordPress works with that with that view generation, how the templates need to look, what the shape of the data is, the life cycles, all that stuff. And so that portion is now in the static site generator. A lot of what you did in your CMS, you're now doing with your static site generator. That's significant when we're considering the landscape. And so now the SSG, the static site generator, is the new heavy. So for example, if I spoke with someone here who had a WordPress site, but they were using WordPress headless, and they were using Gatsby as the static site generator, and I asked them what kind of site they had, they probably wouldn't say they had a WordPress site. They'd probably say, I have a Gatsby site. See what I'm saying? The static site generator is now the heavy. It's now the big entity, kind of the center of your stack now, and it has all these opinions, which are good. Those opinions are meant to help streamline development, help provide a happy path so that you can get to creating something awesome. And so a content management system can approach this by looking to work the way that static site generator works. How do static site generators work? What do they look for? So they can, I'm not really good at fluidly drinking in between. I have to announce that I'm doing it, and it's super awkward. So how do SSGs work? A static site generator is traditionally going to work really, really well with Markdown files and YAML and JSON sitting right there in your repo. That was always kind of the plan with static site generators. In fact, if you look back to Jekyll, it's kind of our best modern OG content management system. It's still, even if you look in the docs now, it says use your favorite markup language, right? Markdown, HTML, and data files, and you can put up a blog, and they're kind of thinking of developers, right? Developers usually don't have a problem writing Markdown or any of that. Turns out, though, content editors don't want to write Markdown and YAML files by hand, or use Git, for that matter. And so we want to work the way that static site generators work. They natively speak Markdown, YAML, all these things, but the content editors don't necessarily. I don't even want to write raw Markdown and YAML and front matter and all that stuff. So this, then, is our new gap. Right? On the one side, we have the static site generator that just needs those files sitting there, and we have content editors that are ready to write the content just in a different format. So that's a much, much smaller gap that we're dealing with there. So if you compare this tiny little gap to what we were doing before, we have, with a monolithic CMS, a bridge over literally everything, this massive undertaking. Now a content management system can be a different kind of bridge. And you got to respect this guy, right? Here you have the best minds in the world and all the budget, and you know that guy built that himself. And he's about to drive a four-wheeler into it. I kind of wish it was a video. So I'm sure he's wearing a helmet. I'm sure he's fine. A bridge over I don't feel like writing Markdown is a much simpler bridge to build. So what does this mean? Where does this leave us? A Git-based CMS is an adapter. It's a very small, almost non-entity in your stack. And that in itself kind of has value as a category. A Git-based CMS is going to turn UI input into Markdown, YAML, JSON, TOML. It's going to convert content strings to blobs. It's going to persist blobs, trees, and commits to a Git API. So in other words, it allows a non-technical editor to write Markdown and push commits. It's an adapter. It's super simple. And all of this is 100% doable from the browser. So that's a pretty different approach here. And so that gives way to the 100% client-side CMS. And I mean, think about that. I'm a front-end developer, and I am the lead for a content management system. Not the front end of the content management system. The whole thing is front end. I lead the whole project as a front end developer. That's the most JAMstack thing ever. Like a client-side CMS, are you kidding? And the ecosystem that we have right now is just absolutely incredible. We have, Markdown as a format is being supported by a collective called Unified, led by Titus Wormer. And he's doing I once saw a quadrant where they had, like, on one side, they had how interesting a project was, and then on the other side, they had how important the project was, and how, we as developers, we tend to focus on that interesting, unimportant apex, like right there. It's like, that's the sweet spot. And so it's those developers that go straight for the important, uninteresting things that are underpinning everything that we're doing, and that's the kind of work that Titus Wormer's doing is Unified. So if you've ever heard of Remark, Rehype, MDX is now a part of the Unified collective. That's critical work, and if you're looking to dig into the JAMstack and the movement, that's one really, really good place to look to contribute, because there's so much to do there, and it's 100% critical. All of these things, all these dreams we have for doing all this cool stuff with MDX and all that, it starts with this layer of making Markdown a really, really viable data format and a really expressive format, and MDX is in the center of that. So we have all these amazing technologies that are really working to make this possible. And that was just one that I wanted to highlight that runs entirely in the browser. So here's a bonus as well. With this Git-based approach and this client-side approach, now your content is code. So if you think about it, this is the way everything else in your stack has probably already gone, right? You have your templates in your repo, you have your static site generator itself is in your repo, your configuration for your CI, for any testing tool, everything, it's all versioned in your repo, and then you have content in a database. And so if you can get that content as code, then you're fully versioned, you're fully atomic. It's a really, really interesting prospect to have everything in each commit. So here's a unique use case that we're looking into right now with Netlify CMS, is open source docs. So if you've ever contributed to open source docs, you've probably noticed, or read open source docs, you've probably noticed they have this, edit this page in GitHub link, right? And you click that, and you get dropped into the GitHub UI, and it works pretty well. You have, but you're editing the raw file, and you can make a commit without really knowing how to make commits, so it kind of does the trick. But it would be really cool to be able to have a content management system that you, as an open source maintainer, can link to that instead, and then anyone that wants to contribute can be in a familiar content management interface, make their changes. Behind the scenes, we're forking your project if we see that they don't have write access, and then all of their changes are going into their repo and then opening a pull request to yours. And for them, they don't see any of that. They just see a content management system, and they're hitting buttons that say things like save. So it's all very much behind the scenes. And we're hoping that this is going to open the door more and kind of grease the skids for people that want to contribute to open source docs and want to write, but that aren't so big on writing all those raw files, and hoping that this will kind of speed that process for them and see an uptick in docs contributions. So if you're an open source maintainer, if that sounds interesting to you, come chase me down. I'll be around for the rest of the day and at the Netlify booth. So yeah, that's in beta right now. So if you're already a Netlify CMS user, you can download the Netlify CMS beta package from NPM and try out that. We're calling it open authoring, so it's up in the docs. And the Netlify CMS site is netlifycms.org. So you can find the docs there, check it out. If you like this idea of Git-based content management, you want to learn more about it, basically there's two shops in town. There's Netlify CMS, which is the open source Git-based approach, and then again, I mentioned them earlier, there's Forestry, and they do this as a service. So if you need things like priority support or something, talk to Forestry. They also do Git-based. But it's a pretty new category. It's really, really interesting, but there's still a lot of new, interesting problems to figure out. And so if you want to contribute to that as well, check out netlifycms.org. Come be a part of the conversation, be a part of the community. And that guy's checking out netlifycms.org already. He's all over it. Thank you so much, everybody.